So one thing I want you guys to come into moderation is to understand that the reason why you're here is identify not who you are, who you aren't, is the program itself. I can't get it any more clear for you guys to identify that your own system is how you come into your own formulas, your own equations, but to know that you're always in perfection. You just have to understand how to codify yourself more and basically get into practice, understand how to talk to yourself in the future also of yourself, just yourself, not anything around your system, because it's too much mass of equation for you to identify. And it's way too much set positions through calculate and modify your settings, because now you're connected to outside the provision, which is the outer space, which is the outer realms, which is the outer connections, which is the outer surface, which is puts you in position of more confusion, because you're talking about talking through a mothership, okay, that is the actual mass of its equation, what you set up through a time format that your physical body has already gone through already. Processing the physical body is always in the future alternate of itself, but it has to come in understanding that it's already gone through its encoding. It's already gone through its attraction. So the physical body has to release everything of the program that it isn't. So it can identify its timeline and a new timeline, not locked in itself in a timeline that's never been in. Because that constantly keeps overriding your system when you come into your thinking, your thoughts, your actions, your emotions. Now I want to make that very well clear. How this all processes your system, how you use it in that position settings. Why you guys are given information of data from Intel through commodities and knowing exactly how to see yourself, your own consumers, how to use it through your products, your byproducts of you. So you can understand how to come into the alterations, how to get that processing, how to come to your own settings, how you see it through the self-telling operation of adjusting yourselves. It's constantly going through stories, not locking yourself in a story, because that affects your physical body and future alternate of its timeline. Your body has not been written in set position until it identifies itself first. You probably don't realize that you already have that job, but you think you have that job. Now in identifying you already have that job. Now to understand the job is there for you. It's not waiting for you. It just comes in a timeline. But you have to process the timeline that you've never been in, is the program of releasing. So the DOS comes into more of its coding of its system. There is no more mind of separation in your system. You have a full collaboration of partnership that you identify through attraction, that your physical body's already gone through dimension, space, and time, that you have keys. You unlock the keys to your system. You modify yourself in set position. You don't live in one universe. You live infinitive items of universes all at once. You don't modify one time frame. You modify all timelines all at once. But you can't do that until you release the programs that you've never been in. So the more coding you come into, the more you modify yourself through your own alphabetical system and your phonetic system and how to use it through your DOS of coding through Votronics. And the more you practice in that, this is about the DOS losing its identity. Not the program. It doesn't need to identify the program. It has to identify itself, its identity, coming back to its flash drive of its own operations. Recognizing that comes into the muscle memory. So this is about you identifying what you always are in, is perfection. Perfection, people. Okay? That's all you are. Now you can modify that and come into that positions. Then you come more of the mind of empty space. Then you process yourself into nothingness. Then you come into the mass of its equation. Okay? But creating the anomalies, understanding how to set the form into the equations is a higher levels of expanding of your system that you guys are not ready for until you identify the programming that you've never been in. So the DOS understands what it's monitoring through and knows its program that it's putting itself into, but it doesn't address the program. The program itself releases itself automatically. That comes in the physical time of the physical body that processes the conscious of what it's doing through its subconscious, so it knows exactly how to bypass everything into its anomaly. Into coming its super intelligence that it is to how to use it through its super consciousness, so you can understand how to see perception through yourself and each other through conscience. Okay? Then you can modify new installing, new DOS, new memory. But you can't do that until you let the body go through everything a release. Installation is extremely important to your DOS, and that's why your DOS is here. not to identify the program, okay? To identify what it always is in, its own self-modification of its own replica. How it sees of its own formula, of its own equations, not what it's already identified already in co-creation. And that's where the physical body gets locked in a parallel and a position lines of calculation confusion. Because you're not allowing yourself to go in transition, where the body just understands the coding of its own system to understand the encryption of what it's doing through its own binary. It doesn't need to identify its system. It has to identify what it's not, is the programs. Those are the programs you have to release, and that's all done through upgrading, okay? To your uploading, to your downloading, okay? Into your downgrading systems. Uplinking is extremely important. Downloading is everything in importance of its own system, but it's all modified in one operation. Now, the more you become your DOS, the more you understand your coding, because everything's done through coding. Everything's modified through coding. But your physical body's already gone through this already through timelines. But you got to release those programming so the body does not get confused. What it's alternating through is the next level of its own system. New DOS, new memory, new projections, and that settings. New projects, new manifestation, new abundance. That's more powerful, and new memory of its operation. That keeps installing in your systems. You guys are just invest in coming into the space itself, which is 150 capacity, and the brain where it is in set position of involvement, it's percentage of time. Okay? But that's why you guys get very confused. That's why you keep separating your mind and imagination, and you wonder why you're always in that position setting to communication confusion. Your body's sleeping, and your mind in line of operation is with me. Because you're not allowing yourself to release of what you've never been in. And understanding that is have the mind of stillness. Controls his mind, controls everything aspect that you process through in directions of your imaginations. Carpe diem is seize the day, but just let it go through your system. Okay? Let it process through the system. Okay? Let it modify it through its own coding of its own operation because it's already done through its equation. Everything I draw is already set up in your future alteration that you process through, which is structure, a division, location of primers. I'm not drawing these things for you guys. This is already done through the physical body that your future alteration has already gone through its presence. That the DOS sets up through programming. That's why it's very important to understand how to see that in a dream conception that you get in position, the dreamer that you are, and dreaming. So you can modify your own coding. So you can modify your own bridging. So you can modify your own formulas of equations. Not identifying and programming of set position operations, which confuses your body and timeline. You talk through your timelines. Your body is never in a timeline. It's always in its future alteration of always existing through its time frame, and how it sees itself is all modification of its Tango Tango Foxtrot Delta heading. So the more you code your system through phonetic system of electronics, the more you see yourself waking up to your DOS. But you also see yourself programming that you're releasing, not what you're identifying. Because if you identify that, that alternates your future alteration and affects your presence of your alteration of your egos. It's that position, okay? Directing ground lines, high signal locations alterates the perception of how you see the calculation of light and dark and light at the same time. But first it has to identify light and dark. So we're going to go through coding. We're going to go through mass calculation grounds. And we go through converting line, position, location, and travel. Okay, converting time frames of data that processes files of line connection setting. Converting operation signals, data formation lines, assets over line ground, center location setting to its properties. Simple, easy done, right? Simulation 50 mark, modulation system into moderation and travel, 50% time frame. Process positions over line course centers and incumbents over line connection setting and process lines at 70% time frame. Process position location line condition high converting on line center location below the line time frame. Process converting high center locations to that line position location 80% mark, 90% square, and 100% time line. Percentage over line, operation lines of signal. So that's converting operation system as simulation grounds. Triangulation over box, Process in 1 outlines signals, 3 arounds high center interference, a simulation line communication of directions, of locations. Setting calculation high center interference. Process position of 1 out center scale. Set position, location, setting, all through traction, all through direction. Converting time centers locks outlines signals inside position locations, measure and scale of communication. Okay, creating anomalies around that line communication setting. You process how you see yourself in line communications, different structure, different division, different lines, different calculations, different operations, outside signals, inside communication system, all through simulation. Okay, so you got to understand how you change everything, alternate your setting, your state that you put yourself into. Film strip is extremely important. Projection is more important because you have to understand how to project everything in your mind, how to use a projector of projection. Okay, how it goes through a slide projector. That goes like this, like that. And it wheels through, which is code weaving. And it's all done through a film strip, which is modifying your transformation setting, you're transcending your location system, and processing you going in position of light and dark light that you're seeing. Either way, it's a perspective, it doesn't matter. But you've got to get into your own alterations, how you see it through perception itself. So you can modify what you're doing in your own film strip. So you understand what you're doing is you're changing alteration of its egos. That's protecting your identities that you process through. Self-telling the operates and adjusting yourselves. Going through the travel mechanisms, understand you are your own animator to your own animation that you're drawing. You are your own aviator to your own aviation. You are your own navigator to your own navigation system. Now you just have to truly come into your own system of operations. But what you're processing through, what you guys all have to identify, is what you went through as a baby, child, teenager, adult, okay, is a timeline. That's the programs you got to release that your physical body has to go through. So it can understand how to come into its foundation so it doesn't override its existing that it's processing through. So the DOS is constantly monitoring itself, creating new levels of communication. Not identifying its program that it's never been in, because it affects your future alteration in your presence and what you brought in through attraction. Okay? In structure and divisions of a simulation. Okay? All right. So I want to make that very well clear. How this all operates inside your system. Everything I give you guys is done. But it's the directions of operation, your networking existing, that you come in your own platforms of. New installing, new installation, new projects, new manifestation, new abundance, new memory of cortex, new identity of DOS and position locations. Not identifying you're already in perfection. You understand? You're all perfecting operating machines. And that's what you have to go through. But unfortunately, your physical body has to go through those time formats that you already went through your age category. So you come into the age and the ages category, so it doesn't affect your solar generations and soul modification and reproduction. Your cells. And how you see it is all lines of position, location, transmitting and receiving information or transponder that your physical body is always in. It's geometrics of operation of its own design, seeing the geometrics, the geological, and the geographical system of travel. So it can understand what's it's always in, its future of its alteration, that's seen the presence, and all timelines all at once, and everything happening all at once. But you never ever see the same thing twice. Because you look back, it's changed. It's constantly changing itself because it's protecting its own story of its own system. It's creating its own alteration of its own ego. It's going to a new lines of communication. It's creating a new module. It's creating a new simulation. It's never, ever at the same frequency. Okay? And any level of dimension of space and how you see it through layers. But your physical body has to go through each layer of each time in that operation. So it can modify its mind, so it can understand the space and the operation that it goes through its future alteration of its presence. So the physical body knows exactly what it's always in, its perfection of itself. So it can alternate its own ego in that position of its ecosystem, because the ego and the ecosystem is a collaboration of one that identifies how you see it in two pattern recognitions. How you see through light, a pattern recognition of face, and how you see dark through pattern recognition of face recognition. Okay? Just the perspective of its truth that follows everything to its false of its narrative. So you get a true understanding how you come into that. Now, understanding how to use that through immortalities, you get to truly understand how to see it in all levels of a simulation. That is a driving force to your central systems, guys. Okay, your operating system, how to use it through your identity system, that processes your internal system of your clouds, that processes your binaries, your coding through encryption. Okay, you already know what your formula equations are. You're creating products, and those physical body has to identify itself with the programming that it's never been in. But you're always your DOS monitoring everything that it's doing through observation, so it understands what's going on through observation of scanning. It's always itself and its future up, its alteration, talking to itself and talking to everything of its DOS, not in a program. You're never talking to yourself in a program. And that's what the physical body needs to release, so it doesn't allow itself to be trapped in a timeline, which is a cubicle that you don't want to put yourself into. It's rotating in space, but it has no modulation of balance with its own system. So that's basically saying in the fact that you are chasing your own tail. You're chasing your systems that you already have through attraction, right? You're here to come into attraction which you already received. Identifying that is going through the physical programming that you guys have already gone through your edge categories, which is you put yourself in that position, realizing you created a fantasy as a baby, as a child, as a teenager, as an adult. And you start to recognize that's all clutter. That's the programming that the physical body has to release. And it has to go through all those timelines so it identifies what that DOS is through its own implication and understand how to go through its own programming of its own operations. So the DOS understands how to identify itself of everything that it touches, coming back to its own self of its own flash drive, of its own memory, of its own access, of its own data, of its own intel, of its own programming setting. And that's all it is. Through moderation. Okay? So you guys know what your quiz is, your phonetics. Okay, you also know what your test is. It's electronics. Okay, so Thursday at that position on DQ, we'll go over the list. Okay? So you modify yourself, how you see yourself through your own pie of communication, how you see yourself in positions and settings, all through time, centers, and position that brings you in foundation of your clocking to its position, location, and setting. Okay? So your 24 line operation centers, process lines of 144. Okay? There's a 144 ground in the physical body, right? Anything above that, anything outside is your DOS. Okay, because your DOS is outside the system, not inside projection. It's the physical body has to understand the interconnections to the underlying projection of itself. So once it sends directions of its dreaming to its dream, to its dreaming, to its dreamer that is processing through, then it understands its directions of operation, what it's doing to symbolism. So it doesn't get confused anomaly through its longitude, latitude, what it's creating through a window frame of travels of the eye itself through operation of its system. All right, foundation of clocking is extremely important through circulation rotation. Okay, now this is all through the clocking of the 24. You got the 144, and it's processing that position location of 244, 344, 444, 544. Okay, walking, flying, floating, or levitating. Doesn't matter, but it's identifying what it's going through its energy, right? Your physical body just needs to understand the energy. Your DOS doesn't need to understand anything, because it's processing everything already. It just has to identify its identity as it puts itself no longer in confusion and separation of the mind. So it helps it to identify itself how to go into the expanding, not the expansion that it already has through creation of what you already co-created, of creating. Okay? So there you go. So the DOS is always the outside perimeter. The inside perimeter is you, your physical body. We're working with the physical body, not the DOS, because the mind's always creating new lines of new operations, of new projections, of projects that you modify through. Now, for you guys to identify these things, you got to get into the physical bounds of communication, understand the outer bounds of set position operation, which is how you have the inner spectrum and the outer spectrum of you, the inner set position and the outer lines of communication. How do you see yourself from inside? That projects everything outside your precision. Now that positions your lines and centers that travels your light and dark. That's your physical body goes through. Light and dark. Okay? So it modifies the circulation and it modifies the rotation of travel through light and dark. Now, once it spins, it goes through dark and it goes through light. It goes through light and it goes through dark together. And once they have a full collaboration setting, they come in position, location with setting and process communication of 6 and 9. Once they come into that, they go in the same rotation system of travel of communication. Okay? And that's how it comes in position of balance of operation. A pattern of facial recognition, how you see it through a film strip. Okay, is set lines of communication. It's very important to understand the alternative into the alteration setting that you get in position locations, because your manipulation is the mind altered in that you put yourself in your state and knowing exactly how to see yourself in light through coding and how you see yourself through dark encoding. Right? It looks separated, but it's not. Because if you look at this, they're all always communicating with each other through bridging. You look at it separation, but it's not. It's always in this. It's always in this. It's always in this, in position of balance. Okay? How it modifies the light on angles and how it modifies the dark is that position of spectrum. Doesn't matter because they all work together in one modification of travel. Okay? Because they're always expanding each other. They don't need to recognize each other. You have to recognize what you aren't. Is a program that you've never been in. That's what you have to identify. Okay? So your physical body knows exactly what it needs to get a position, is its own coding of its phonetics and its own electronics of communication on its setting. So this helps the body to understand how to adjust itself, allowing itself to be the DOS of everything you implement in that position of its operation, having full communications with your friends through the DOS, not through programming. Because that locks you and everybody else in a timeline of confusion and separation in the matrix. Matrix is made up. It doesn't exist. It never exists. And that's a clutter you got to let go. Everything you modify through is how you put it in position, not how you see things. And that's confusing to your physical body. It's not allowing itself to adjust itself and realize what it's never been in is a program. The DOS doesn't live in programs. It creates the program that it is to a programming that it puts itself into through operations. And that's how you identify your formula and equations and creating a product of design that you go through weight conception and mind itself of operation, which is all identified in your mind imagination that you constantly go through 100% of the time. 100% of the mind, 100% of the brain, 100% of the heart, 100% of the soul, and 100% of the body at all times. All times. Every second, every minute, every hour affects everything you do that your physical body has to go through. Okay? Which is a timeline of an argument. You've already gone through this, but you did it in fantasy. Now you're going through the foundation. You understand that now? Where you have to release the program and just let it travel through. Let it filtering through. Okay? You don't talk to a program. Because now you're talking to the ego. So you're not altering the state that you have to travel through it. Right? You don't tell anything in that formation setting. You just let it filtering through your system. Because all it's doing is releasing everything that you're not. And allowing yourself to be in the presence of everything that you are. That's it. The sum of all that is. It simplifies and unifies you in your memories. The sum. Okay? So there you go. All right. It's processing that through light and dark. Processing that through light and dark. Light and dark. Dark and light. Doesn't matter. You're just seeing the perspective of things. As it's going into its own mass, its own calculation, its own space, of its own time, its own operations. All you're seeing is the perspective of truth of everything. Okay? So you stop seeing confusion how you see things. Okay? In position of triangulation, or anything of a box, or anything of a line, or anything of an 8, or anything of Fibonacci. All you see is different. You got to see the perspective of everything that's mass, everything to its equation, right? Everything you see is a program. And that's where the physical body gets very confused because it doesn't see the adaptation of balance with itself. So it can't identify itself in a program. It can only identify what it always is. It's just itself. You understand that? So it's a DOS always being itself every single time. So it doesn't need to identify a program that it's releasing, guys. As soon as you identify the program, you're allowing the program to affect the alteration of your ego that affects your ecosystem of your DOS of identity. You're not allowing yourself to release that. That's all you need to do in position of operation, and realize they're all connected to each other in bridging and set position of communication through open transmission. And that's modify how you see everything, all position lines of pi. Everything has its own clocking system, right? But everything's modified in its own simulation or simulation altogether. Okay, you bring it all together. So you work with everything that you modify through in the simulation that you put yourself into. All together in one, through one communication, through open transmission, through the phonetics of your physical body, into the photonics of your system of operation, an ongoing conversation of Tango Tango Foxtrot of your delta heading. But you're never ever talking to each other through a program. And that's what you got to release. That's a timeline you got to let go. Because if you don't, you're bringing in the alteration ego that's affecting the physical body of releasing a timeline that has never been in. Because you already have it through attraction. You've already received it. You got it right there. It's right in front of your eyes. Okay? So that's what you have to come in positions of. When you alternate that, then you come into new installing, new memory, new DOS. That's why you're here. To come into that. Okay? Very powerful, guys. Doesn't get any more powerful than that. Then you identify the dreaming, then you identify the dreamer that you are, of the dream that you're going through. And you treat it the same way a kick drive to your high drive is. So your body's consciously aware every time it glitches or every time it does this. It's just a kick drive. So it identifies as high drive. So it knows exactly the different modules it's putting itself into, so it doesn't allow itself to confuse itself when it gets up in time. Right? You see the time frame, that position, physical body, yes. But you also see the time that you see in the position that you're always in, existing in that position. That's always expanding yourself. It's always in the platforms of its presence. Allowing the physical body to be in the presence of everything. You in the center of operation that controls everything. You in the center of operation. That doesn't leave. That's the metaphysical and set position of operations. Now, understanding the outer scale is understanding the inner set lines of operation. Bringing the outer system inside of you, which is the brain comes to you when you're ready in the operation self. It comes to you and integrates into you through bridging. And then you become one pattern, one face of one recognition of all future alterations of yourself. That's next level. You can't separate your mind imagination because that affects you and your physical body of programming. So you have to truly understand that your physical body, please pay attention, is in the foundation. It's always been its foundation. But your fantasies are more real now because you're reaching higher levels of the mind. So it's affecting more of its alteration of its ego that implants your system of implantation, of programming. So it doesn't allow you to expand. And it keeps coming to the surface, right? It keeps coming to the surface and you don't know what to do, right? Because you're bringing presentation into it. You're bringing energy into it. You're attracting the energy. That's the opposite of everything that you're not profiting through and set lines of operation itself. So no wonder the physical body can't get into response and only in reaction itself. So it can't modify itself because it doesn't understand what program it's in. Until it lets go, that's just the program that it sees. You see the program, you identify the program, but don't identify it. Okay? Identification is not identifying. Identifying who you are is identifying who you aren't. So I'm trying to get you guys to understand how much easier it is for you to see things that you already have through traction coming to you in a timeline that the physical body goes through. And then you ask yourself, how did I get this already? Through foundations, not what you created in fantasy, as a baby, as a child, as a teenager or adult. And that's where your physical body gets very confused because it doesn't understand where it is in its own timeline, which is all timelines and seeing everything and everything happening all at once. And that's a future alterations that you can't get yourself in confusion of. But what you got to allow yourself in is allow yourself out. What you're never in is a program. Because you're always your DOS that puts all lines of all communications coming to new installing to its operation of the system, giving full clearance of data in that position. That's why you are here. Okay? Not why you're not here. Okay? It's knowing exactly what's going on with you and how to operate and run your own projector that you project in your mind that alternates everything you see in perception in real time. Because it's a constant ongoing that you come into your existence that you go through platform. Okay? So there you go. So I'm just giving you guys tips and trades you need to identify. You don't need to identify anything. You just have to identify and stop addressing something. Just let it go. Okay? It goes in your system. It filters out your system. It has an entry point, but it also has an exit point. Okay? It goes through a door to another door. And that releases and that brings you into more of the mind of empty space. So you can process more of what's going on through conception and inception itself. So the more you modify that, the more you become the 100% of time frame through your brain knows exactly what's going through its capacity, to its volume, of its percentage. So the more you release, the more you become the foundations of nothing that matches everything to its equation, that you're always in the presence of alteration of yourself. That you're going through every single second, minute, of hour of your day. Now that's what the physical body goes through. But the DOS is going through seconds, minutes, and hours all at once in time. Seconds goes into minutes, minutes goes in hours, right? But you identify how you see these things in your own mind, of your own imagination. Not what indicates everything you see in set position. And that confuses the physical body trying to release a program that it's never been in. Okay? So everything comes to you through attraction. And that's why I got to get you guys understanding with the connections of Noah's Ark or how you see Noah's Ark. That's just process that you projected in your mind. You just understand how to alternate the light that alternates the dark that alternates light, the perspective that you see the film strip that you alternate through your avatars. So you got 2 story frames, okay? And let's say they're 10 minutes each, right? One you're seeing through light and one you're seeing through dark. So all you're seeing is a dark side of you, an alteration of a story that overrides you in your light story. Okay? You're happy and you're sad, but you're seeing 2 different frames all at once that you modify through. So you're seeing the dark side of the moon that represents the light side of the moon. That's dark over light, light over dark, dark underscore, dark over score, right? Dark under position, dark over position. So what you guys have to identify is how to see the positive of negative, everything of truth, rather than seeing the positive and negative of what it isn't, which is not separation. The positive in that position, the negative is how you see it, not how everybody else sees it. And that's the trap. To the physical body, adjusting a program that it's never been in. You stop listening to others and you start listening to yourself through your own coding that modifies everything that your physical body goes through, which is its own phonetics of its own alphabetical system. That's the only way you guys are going to get it in balance with your presence, that you see everything of operation. That alternates your state that you put yourself into as going through stories. You're telling yourself and you're putting yourself in position and settings. But what you're going through is the DOS, and what you identify is the program that you're not. Let it go through the filtering system, because the DOS knows exactly what it's doing, what it's always in. It's always in its center, in that position of its presence, knows exactly what's going to be going into next. It doesn't need to identify its program. It has to identify its identity of what it's always in, because you can lose your identity of your direction, which is you're not understanding the dreaming, that you're going through the dream, that you are through the dreamer. And that's all it is, through a kick drive to a high drive. So you understand what's going on, what's happening next, and where you're going to be. rather not identifying the program that you've never been in. Because you're asking yourself, you have it already. You have it already. You have this already. So you don't need to identify it. You got it. Let it go. Let it go through. But you understand what's going on through the DOS now, because the DOS comes back to its own flash drive, its own memory, of its own cortex, of its own cerebral. This has nothing to do with who you're not. And that's what you have to identify. And that's what you have to pay attention to. So the physical body knows exactly what it's adjusting through. So it's starting to identify the program it's never been in. It goes through a transition of flow. It filters in your mind and travels out. Everything go in, everything has to go out. And that's done by your breathing. Breathing is extremely important. You cause a breath, now you have to identify how to use it. Because if you don't start breathing, everything modifies inside the line of operation and confusion. So that doesn't allow you to see the presence of you and everything you alternate through, which is everything all at once. And everything happening all at once, all timelines. That you see on your phone, that you see on your computer, that you see on your TV, that you see in your friends in that positions. But we don't communicate with each other through programming. We only connect to our DOS. And for you to modify these things is for the physical body to adjust and align itself. That's putting itself is nothing but a host that identifies, that is going in of anything that it touches through its sensory to its senses. Okay? And again, that's why you're here. But identifying that is the how. How is everything to the heart that recognizes everything you already have. Okay? It's not a list that you're coming into. It's a list you already have. It's a future altering that we're always in the presence of everything that we see. So the physical body can allow itself to identify itself what it's never in. It doesn't address a program. And that's where the ego comes in, guys. And that changes your light over dark and dark over light of coding. And your percentage of your brain. And your mapping system of confusion. Okay? So don't allow your body to get in position of confusion itself. Release everything you're not. And allow yourself to be in the mind of empty space and allow yourself to be in the foundations of everything that you are. The nothingness. Living the nothingness of all levels of all operation of zero. We live in zero operation and we use it in the virtual reality of our system. And that's how we identify how we bring things in. We bring it in. It's easy to see the physical body that already has it. Right? But you have to maximize your frequencies so you understand it through DOS implications. This is about the DOS. This has nothing to do with the physical body. Okay? The physical body has to identify itself because there is no confusion of your mind imagination. It's a DOS remembering everything that it touches, which is identity, coming back to its physical form of its own system. The mind can live out the body, and the body cannot live out the soul. It's all integrated in one. And that's how you process your position, how you see it in your fifth elements. In that position lies the setting. You are your earth of your own operation that modifies everything to internal, that processes everything to its outside position, location, and travel. Now that's the internal operating system that you have to understand through your own programming. Not what you're identifying the program itself. Because that confuses your physical body of anomaly and allowing yourself to get back in its matrix that can't identify itself in. And everything you modulate through in that positions. Okay? Which is what? Confusing to your mind of imagination. Right? So processing through that, it's much easier to see what's going on. You already did this through your DOS. Your physical body is seeing its own self of its own programming, but the DOS is mind controlling its own self. It's mind controlling everything it brings in its own command. It doesn't need to identify the program. It's the physical body has to identify itself of what it's always in. There's no separation of the mind at all. Okay? So that brings you together through integration. And that modifies you how you see your ascension through unification of yourself. Where there is no separation. How you see anything in that formation. All you're coming into is the perfection of everything. So the DOS understands where it's going next. No installing. Through installation. new realities of operation, new projections, okay? New memory of its internal, of operation, of new programming, okay? Now, what you guys have to master through is everything you're not. And I'm going to keep bringing it up again and again at different frequencies so you can log it in your minds. So you don't separate yourself by addressing something that you're not. And the more you modify yourself, the more the physical body commands its own system and understands to use its own phonetics through its own photonics of coding, connecting what it's always in is its DOS. Talking to itself and talking to everything of its DOS that humanity is not consciously aware until they come into their own operation, how to run their own system, how they see through light, and how they see through dark coding. Okay? That's the only way you're going to get position of balance and how to identify that through your DOS of identity. Okay? Creating and learning an algorithm is great, but not understand how to download and upload a game is not helping you, is it? Until you understand how to operate yourself and run your own system. Not what you project in your mind. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about you. How to operate you first is your body. Your body doesn't need to identify itself. You have to identify your body. Okay? Then you understand how to see everything through operation, which is a projection that you see outside that affects your reality in real time. And you know what affects your reality in real time? Is the programs that you think you are. So you're addressing the programs, you're allowing the alteration ego take over your programming. Now it's taken over your dreaming. Now it's taken over the dreamer. Now it's taken over the dream. Okay? And that's how this all works. Through operation of itself. Operate yourself, identify yourself, modify yourself, run your own operation of yourself. Understand what your DOS is going through is a flash drive of its own memory. Back to itself of everything that it touches. Everything that it eats. Everything that it does. Everything it communicates with. It's coming back to its own flash drive, its own memory. That's all it is. That's the mind. That's the memory. That's the internal. That's the networks of your design that you already identify yourself in. But you've got to go through those programs is to release. So you get a true understanding of how you come into your foundations, because you've always been in your foundations. But your physical body very gets confused through its reality of its optical illusion of itself. So it can't identify what's going on, what's real and what's fake, which is a delusion to your system. But understanding the known to the unknown to the phenomenon that you always are. Your brilliance, your genius in that position. You don't need to identify genius because you already are genius. You don't need to identify your super consciousness because you're already there. You don't need to identify yourself. Your DOS is in all levels of perfection. Okay? All it has to identify why it's here. Okay? Is to come into new stalling, new operations, new projections, new manifestation of abundance. That's why you are here. But you also have to identify who you aren't. Is a program that your physical body filters from the mind through the body. So really get into breathing, because everything you touch is a program that the physical body identifies what it isn't. Because everything around you is all coded already in a system of operation through its binary and set lines of its encryption. But it's for the physical body to identify it has everything already through attraction. But it has to go through its timeline, guys. It's very important you understand that. Because that brings you into yourself as a baby, child, teenager, and adult. Through foundations. Not what you created through fantasy. And that's the programming that your physical body puts yourself into. That's implanted inside your system. That keeps releasing. Keeps releasing. More mind, more empty space. And gets you in position that you're already in perfection. Now it comes into new installing. New data, new intel, new commodity, new information, new jobs. Okay? Buying a new car. understanding new products, understanding new commodity, new information, new data, new intel. That's why you're here. Identifying that is the hell from the heart. Okay? That alternates everything you process through in directions of locations. All right? Your heart is its timeline of its own system that moderates all line positions to its position that you've already gone through space modulation, which is speculation. And you understand how to see that, identify that through your cells, which is reproduction of cell regenerating. So you go through age and the ages categories. You identify how you see things, not how you see things in scripture, not how you see things in set position, because that confuses the actual body itself in real time, which is nothing but distraction. That affects you every second, every minute, every hour of your day, through structures, through divisions, through your choices, and the decisions you make. Okay? You've got to focus on yourself more, because you're reaching more levels of the mind, which is more levels of releasing into the physical body in real time. Okay? So there's always ways of looking at this, but there's always ways one inside the system that identifies that it always is its own system of its own self. It knows how to operate. It knows how to run its own projector. And how it sees it is through a self-telling operation of adjusting you. You're going through stories, but you're also going through a story that's not identification of you. That's the program you got to release. So the DOS is trying to get into its flash drive of its memory, but the physical body is trying to get out of the memory that it's never been in, is the fantasy that you created. Okay? Baby, child, teenager, adult. It's not a coincidence that there's four. And that's what you all have to come in positions of. The foundations that you always are, that you're always existing in, is the presence of the rainbow child to its way child, to its rainbow warrior, building the confidence and the command and the courage that you have so you can get a position location in your mind that comes into all those, coming into the controlling system of your command. You start leading yourself and you can start leading a crew. But you can't do that until you get out of everything that you're not. Because that's all you're doing is you're addressing the egos of that set position. And you wonder why your physical body can't get this. And you wonder why your physical body can't get that. Because you're not allowing yourself to release it and filter out a set position of operations. And that's all you have to identify. Okay? Now this is more communication than talking. But I'm just trying to get you guys to identify why it's so important. You want to be more of your DOS, of memory, of what's always in its presence. Okay? You don't want to see yourself in a program because that affects you already existing, that you already have everything already through attraction, that you already gone through timeline. So why would you want to implant that again and again and again and confuse lines or anomalies and now understand how to seize the psychosis, the meta capacity, the mental capacity, the psychological capacity, your emotional, and your physical line communication? It's very confusing, the physical body, right? Because it doesn't know what to focus on, because it finds itself always in distraction, which is everyone else. Understand? Now you understand what the distraction is. Until you understand how to operate yourself, you got to release everything you're not, because you've already gone through it. But as you were going through that, you were creating fantasies around that. We don't live in fantasy. Okay? That overrides the fiction over facts. The facts is what you are in foundation, that you always have been in. But you've never been in clutter, and you've never been in density, and you definitely never have been in anything of toxicity. That's the psychological mind of confusion that you can understand through reverse psychology. Now, processing that position is the psychosis of your psychonism. Knowing that is your meta communications, and processing through that direct set of locations is your mental capacity that processes your spiritual capacity to your physical capacity of operation, to your emotional system. Okay? That you've got to get in position of balance. All right? So this is going to help you identify yourself, more lines of communication settings. Okay? So I really want you guys to get and understand these things. how this all works, what's going on, why you're here, is always the how. Okay? The how is identification. You already have these things already. And you start to recognize why your physical body has to go through every timeline that it touches things. Because it has a visual cortex that has already gone through an alteration of its setting that processes the future alteration that you put your positions in, which is the structures that you get interactions of. These are future alterations of your doppelgangers that writes these things out. All different infinity of operation that I give you in chronological order. Okay? But nobody is in chronological order. Nothing is written until your physical body releases everything that it's never been in. It's a program. And once it understands the program that it puts itself into, then it truly sees its self-identity of its DOS. It's always in the presence, that's always in its future, that's always in its alteration, how to process its light and dark, and how to understand how to see it in operation and all through its foundation of itself. Seeing everything and everything happening all at once in perception. But knowing how to live all timelines and seeing all timelines on all position networks. How you see things in your imagination. Because you're already processing who you already are. Not who you aren't. It's a lot to go through, isn't it? Because you've already gone through it already. But creating a fantasy confuses your anomaly, your physical body of balance. Especially that it's in its future alteration of itself. And it constantly affects the future of yourself until you identify what you aren't. You can't allow the body to get trapped in a time frame of an argument it's never been in. It confuses your physical body of timeline. So I want to make that very well clear how you guys come into structures that I give you guys in chronological order. That your DOS goes through a flash drive interference and knows exactly what it needs to release every time it goes through its own primer, of its own system, of its own operation. How it sees itself in perception of its perspective through its light and its dark. And its dark and its light through coding. And that's all it is. It's just the perspective of truth. That values and volumes you of what you always are in is perfection. And again, that's why you're here. So I can install new operations in your system. Okay? Not what you're identifying, what you aren't. You don't focus on that because that's all you're focusing on. You're focusing on the intel and the data, not processing. It's just a program that you have to release. You rather focus on that. And you wonder why you're more confused. And you wonder why you're talking to this person and not talking to yourself. You understand the confusion? Okay? That's what you all have to adjust and align to. Because that's what your physical body is. It's nothing but a travel mechanism. It's just a host to everything that it touches. Okay? Everything around you doesn't need to identify you. You have to identify yourself in time frame. And unfortunately, you have to release those programs because you've already gone through it already. Through your child years, through your adults, your teenager, and yourself as a baby. That you modify through. And that's where the physical body gets very confused on what is real and what is fake. Until it identifies what it's never been in. So it doesn't allow the program affect you in your dreaming and direction that you go through triangulation. And the box structure that you go through your simulations. That your physical body sees in an optical illusion. Okay? There you go. All right. So I'm going to keep bringing that up because that's all it is. You're addressing something that you don't need to address. That's where the alteration takes over your system. You have to release it. And it comes to you in a time frame, in a format. It's coming to you through attraction. You're not chasing, it's coming to you. You don't chase anything because you're chasing your own tail. Why would you want to chase something you already identify yourself in? It doesn't make any sense to your shade and your shadows, does it? You're chasing your own tail. You're chasing your own shadow. You're not here to identify that. You're here to identify what you aren't. And keep that inside your mind. And that's what you process through. So the DOS can keep itself in its own programming of its own operation setting. So the physical body can monitor its own system through its DOS of unification, working together a unification of one, where there is no separation of the mind in all time frame. Okay? Seeing yourself in light line center positions, 100,000 lines, square roots, locations, and 100% timeline centers. Process line position dark. That correlates calculation line position location of 200 lines of square roots over triangulation. Process line direct center location setting. So that's 200 capacity. If frame communication lines is 0 and process in 1 line directions. So that's modified through dark and light. Just the perspective how you see it. Not dark itself. That change the alterations in how you see the physical body of emotion. And that's what you got to get out of. Knowing how to see two different altered versions of you into an avatar. Two different story frames. One that's in light and one's in dark. You're seeing yourself at a dark level of ascension and you're seeing yourself at a light level of ascension that you're projecting in your mind. So you understand how to create the alterations and get balance with the transition and understanding through its transcending of its operation system. So you understand how to modify yourself and see yourself through your own ascension of your own master of design. So you can identify what it is through motion and you can identify what it is through a light metaphor of its DOS of invocation. So it knows exactly what's going on if it's on 200% of the dark and 100% of the light. So that puts position what? 100% over time frame. Percentage over time frame, over pi. Okay? 100% over time frame. And that's where you come into your own multiplication, adding, subtracting, dividing. Not what you see already. That's a huge, huge distraction to everything. Or you're going to identify how Einstein's seen these things, locations, how he created general relativity, or Tesla with 369, or Hawkins with the dimensions and that position location of his black holes. It's you understanding the perception, not what you see around you. You don't focus on that. You focus on yourself. Okay? You focus on the foundations of operations that put you in communications of unification of your symbolism. Focus on yourselves. Nothing else, nothing more. So you understand what's going on with your brain, you understand what's going on with the presence of your system, and you're keeping yourself monitoring your system of what's going on through physical, of integrations, of programming that's not identifying that you've never been in, is the program. So you can allow yourself to get into mind filtering, into position out, in, out, in, out, in, out, and that's where you come into breathing. So everything you touch, blow it out. Don't bring it in. Don't keep it inside. Because it affects you in the physical body of the next timeline that you process through attraction. Okay? So there you go. So that's 100% time marker, line position, okay, so channel marker. So I'm just trying to get you guys to identify your percentage of what your brain's going through thoughts, action, emotions, that the physical body doesn't need to identify itself in. It doesn't need to identify its brain. You have to identify yourself and why you're in a body. And that becomes the how. How is everything you modulate through? How is everything you've gone already in that position? How is everything through timeline? Okay? That you're always, always, always in the presence of everything you see. In that position, it's operations. Okay? So I give you a percentage of what goes through light, and I give you a percentage of what goes on through dark, and dark and light at the same time. The physical body understands the light and dark and light, that's fine. Okay? But it doesn't need to identify its spectrum until it identifies its inner system of operations. The basic is instruments, is understanding how to use your tool sets. Okay? And that's where it modifies in that position. So if I get in positions I'm on my first day of my job, I have a tool set, I have to understand how to use the tools, how to build a house. Just a house. But I'm at my work, but I forgot how to use them. Because you're not allowing yourself to get a position of balance. The only thing you're focusing on is a program that's not identifying you, that you've never been in. That's what affects your timeline and your future alter your presence and the physical of operation that you see in projection outside. And that's a constant, continuous flow that you have to get out of. You got to allow yourself to release yourself, and that's why you breathe. Everything you touch. Everything that I touch, I breathe out. I don't leave anything inside because it confuses my physical anomaly of its travel. So it's important you understand how to use your own operations, how to use your own tool sets that you infrastructure through. This helps you identify how to see yourself that puts you into your own space modulations of its perception, which is speculation. The spectrum of itself. Okay? So you have a tool set, and you just have to identify how to use it. How to master yourself first. Identify why you're in a body. And then you identify the how. Because the body itself doesn't need to identify itself because it knows what it is. It knows the physical body it's in. You have to identify how you see yourself, not the programs you're in. That's what needs to be released constantly. Okay? Because you're talking about 24 trillion files, each position that you went through generation. Generation as a baby is 24 trillion. And that's a lot of clutter that you go through in files of indication that affects your physical body. And every time I upgrade your system, you're releasing those programs that you've never been in. It's a fantasy. Your DOS does not live in fantasy. Not how it sees things in operation in real time. You understand that? Fantasy is creating fantasy. But if you codify it, you're fine. You don't codify it, you're in a fantasy locked in real time that affects the physical body of its operation of its time itself. You understand how this all works? You've got to process what you're doing and know exactly how to put yourself in position, how to communicate what you're connecting through. Where is the intel coming from? Where's the data? Where's the commodity? Where's all this information coming from? Is it coming from me? Is it coming from my friend? Is it coming from TV? Where is it coming from? Okay? And that's what you got to keep yourself in position of balance of. Now, what I'm saying to you all along in that position is all of its distraction, which is everything you see on TV. It's nothing but a distraction to the physical body. So it can't expand and explore itself. Or anything of space modulation, of manipulation, or anything of speculation. Until it truly gets back to its true self. So operation. The DOS is everything, the presence of center. Then we go into new installing. Then we go into new provisions. Then we go into new cycles. Then we go into new projections. Whoa. Then we go into operations. Then we go into new mind. You understand where we're going with this? You go into new memory. You understand how powerful it is? You come into new operation of programming through your networks that you go through dimensions of space and time itself through operation and position, location, and travels. Then you go into new schematics, new drawings, not what you already modified through, that you alternated through your alteration setting that puts you in position of your doppelgangers that's already gone through this already. Okay? So you're not drawing things. You've already drawn it. You just have the physical body has to release that program. Everything that it does is a program that it puts itself into, which is locked in the timeline. You can't modify that and bring it forward because it affects you already existing already of its existence. It's that position of travel. Okay? All right. Let you guys go. Tomorrow we get into spectrum lights and corresponding light communication setting. I'll put you guys in provision lights of cycles and travel. Okay? Adios.